Hello, hello, everyone.
Hello,
Hello.
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 So, this is the very first Love Lounge Live Legal Edition with the firm Lighthouse Family Law. I am Nioka Bush, the firm admin. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. This is Isabel. I am the executive assistant at Lighthouse Family Law.
And this is Tiatra. I am the paralegal at Lighthouse Family Law.
And of course, I'm Wendy Bowen. I'm the attorney at Lighthouse Family Law.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, today during this live, our topic will be when is a person obligated to pay child support?
Okay.
Interesting topic.
So we know child support is one of those touchy issues, right? Everybody's always talking
Mhm.
about gotta pay child support, gotta pay child support. If you're ever at family court, sometimes when they have child support court for DSS, it's always interesting to hear the conversations about child support and why people have to pay child support. So many people don't know this because it's new in 2023.
Mm.
um, South Carolina decided that child support obligations would start at the date of conception. Now, that is new. That means when the day you conceive the child, your obligation for child support starts.
Oh, wow.
That
But
really
how do they
changes. Go ahead.
but how do they know? How do they figure the conception out?
Right? Isn't that interesting? So, date of conception would be maybe the doctor, they go by what the doctor would say the date of conception is, possibly. Since you have a medical provider, if the person is able to receive medical care, right? Because we know that can be an issue sometimes, but um, quite possibly the doctor would decide when that date of conception is.
Mm.
Okay.
I guess,
So, oh,
too, right? What if, I mean, obviously there's a pregnancy. Um, what if the dad, I guess my question, just looking at this, what about dad being dad? Is that the dad? Is it how do we know at that point in order for there to be? I mean, because
right,
you could be married and not be together and still have um,
a
a
child out of
child
wedlock.
out of wedlock, right? Um,
Mhm.
so what about that? What about if how do you how do we know who bio dad is?
Yeah, so does it go by bio dad or does it go by legal parent?
You know what,
What
Taylor?
if
That's a good question because bio dad, of course, that takes a paternity test or DNA testing, but legal father, so we say legal father, a lot of people don't know the difference. If you're married to someone and you are considered the legal father to a child, even if you're not the biological father to the child. So that's a good question, but it says biological dad. But
Mm.
at that point, the date of conception, you don't know who biological dad is. Isabel, what was your comment going to be?
I have a question? So, does it mean that if I have a biological father and I have a stepdad, does it mean that only the biological father has to pay child support?
Yes. So it is the biological father that is supposed to pay the child support.
Mm.
Interesting.
So will the legal father not have any ties to
So
to have to pay child support?
so that's a whole nother that opens up a whole nother can of worms, I think, when we're
Oh
looking and
wow.
talking about legal father versus biological father. But let's take a look at some of the things that, okay, we know it's from conception, right? Let's take a look at some of the things that you have to pay. So of course, they would have to pay the child support, right? So the child support obligation. Um, and then they would have to pay 50% of the mother's pregnancy expenses.
And what are considered pregnancy expenses?
So I guess that's also a wide range of a big question mark, right? Because
Yeah.
we know that includes hospital expenses. So if there's a hospital bill, any doctor's visits that are not um, covered, like out of pocket, I would assume. If you look at number three, it says it's 50% of the mother's insurance premiums that are not paid by her employer or a government program. So you have insurance. But what if the doctor says, or what if mom just decides, you know what, I think I have to have a special diet to eat because I'm sick, like you have morning sickness when you're pregnant. Um,
Oh,
it is our dietary needs going to be considered pregnancy expenses? I wonder. Is that an argument that can be made, or
or what if she feels like she needs certain procedures? Like she now feels like she needs to go in regularly to get a massage, or
right, right?
or to
Yeah.
just oh,
So a
were you gonna say?
massage. I wonder if you could argue that, or if it has to be that the doctor will say that that was required, but it just says pregnancy expenses. What else could be a pregnancy expense you guys could think about? Because don't we buy vitamins sometimes when we're pregnant? They're not
Oh yeah,
always
prenatals.
like
Supplements.
prenatal vitamins. They're not always like that. Um,
Oh, and the clothes when you have to change your basically your
I was
wardrobe
thinking
for
about
nine
that.
months.
yeah, you have to
Oh
change your
wow.
entire wardrobe for pregnancy most times.
And then
That's a,
you
that was a
gotta
good
change
one.
your, yeah, you gotta change it per the trimester too, because you're not gonna be the same size at the first trimester as you are at the third trimester.
Right.
Mm.
And then, so it says mother's
How
pregnancy expenses. So I guess child support too, because a lot of people will argue sometimes um, that dads, they start preparing for the child. So you know how mother prepares for a child, like a family, they start buying clothes and diapers and those kinds of things. It's not listed. That would be considered in the child support payment that the father would have to make. I don't see anything that says that they would be responsible for half of that. If I guess if they're paying the child support
Mm.
obligation. So what happens? Who was getting ready to ask a question?
Tiatra, were you about to ask a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure that, the child support payment obligations were basically just everything for the child, like clothes, bottles, food, formula, and
I think
the pregnancy expenses are just completely different from that.
right. That's two
Oh,
separate things.
Oh
Because
wow.
child support, if you remember, like I don't think it's not changing how child support is calculated. So, we have the South Carolina child support guidelines, and so with that, there's formulas and there's an ABC. There's all these calculations, but they look at the gross income, and if the person isn't working, they will actually say, just put minimum wage on it and say this person makes minimum wage and then calculate that way. They also look at things like daycare, other children in the home, or other child support obligations you might have. So that would be the child support um, portion. How do you feel about the 50% of the mother's pregnancy expenses, though? How do you feel about that?
That seems rather steep.
Why do you
yeah.
think that seems steep?
Only because what if in an instance that, you know, you go through the whole pregnancy, but then the mother no longer wants to, you know, keep keep the keep be the custodial parent. And
Right,
now the father is now the custodial parent, but he has paid, I mean, essentially it is in good nature to contribute to the mother's pregnancy expenses, but I'm not sure if 50%, maybe like a 35. take take some off the top.
So um I'm gonna play devil's advocate. It takes two to tango, right? When you
This is
getting,
true.
you're doing what you're doing. There's always a
This is
possibility.
true.
And so, why should I have to bear that expense, or why should the woman have to bear that expense alone, right? I mean, it's but you mentioned something interesting, Nioka. So, what if that happens? What if we get we get past the pregnancy, everybody's healthy, everybody's happy, and mom says, you know what, I'm no longer going to be the primary custodial parent. So now we're looking at people who aren't married. So in the
Mm.
state of South Carolina, if you have a child and you're not married, mother has custody. So there would need to be, of course, dad's got to go do what he's got to do to file and get custody or whatever. But it may be a possibility, right? Does this open up a whole new can of worms for dad saying, I want to be reimbursed for those expenses that I paid during this pregnancy? Or is that just it? Or do I get reimbursed for the child support alone, not the 50% of the mother's pregnancy expenses, because that was there. The child support, do I get reimbursed for that? Should she have to reimburse me for that part? Because is it child support if the child is not here yet, you're paying child support through the pregnancy. Should that child support is being paid because there's a pregnancy, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So I mean, if that's almost like you still need lights, you still need food, you still whatever. If she bought clothes or whatever, should there be a reimbursement, or is that just it? Like it is what it
Mm.
is.
I feel like there should be a reimbursement, especially what if you're going to the classes, you're taking like doula classes with her, then she doesn't want to, or what if she decides that she wants to give the child up for adoption? Then what
Well,
happens?
that's a whole nother can of worms too. I mean, if you got a father that's involved, I think a part of that would be let's let dad keep the child, that kind of thing.
Mm.
But those are all good questions to ask. My primary question is, what happens if he's not the biological father and you pay
Same.
that?
Ooh.
I was thinking the same thing. How does this affect cases where paternity isn't established until later?
Right.
Mm.
So there is something that says that since child support is due at conception, and if you're waiting, just say the alleged father or named father is saying, I'm not the dad, right? And so he wants to wait until there's a paternity test and it is established. If it is contested and it is established, then he would owe child support retroactive to the date of conception. And he would also owe the 50% in the pregnancy expenses. And this statute says interest accrues on that amount. So he would have to pay interest as well on that
Wow.
if it's established that he is the actual father. That there's interest on that arrearage. So the child will be here. You got a child that's here. They go to court. There's some kind of paternity. There's medical evidence that's established. So she would get whatever that retroactive child support is and the 50% of all of those expenses. And then boom, there's also interest attached to that.
Ooh, that's steep.
Yeah.
The interest, wow, the interest is going to
Wow.
really be the one that's going to affect a lot of people.
9 months of not 9 to 10 months. If you carry full term, everybody knows it's really 10 months, not 9 months. But if you're looking at 9 to 10 months of back child support, what they call back child support. I got to pay back child support. Yes, you're looking at 9 to 10 months of that, and then
Then the
fifty
interest.
percent of if she brings all these receipts and whatever invoices or bills, and the court says you got to pay 50% of that, we know medical care is expensive. So you got to pay
Yes.
50% of that. And then if she can show, well, this is what I pay for my insurance as well, she can show that. Think about what that number could be starting out, the child's fresh and new. And then child support continues to go forward because you still got to take care of the child now, child going forward. So then you have child support moving forward as well. So that's what you're looking at, all of that. Now, we're not saying child support is good or bad or anything like that. I don't want anyone to get that idea. Of course, we all think parents who have children should take care of their children. just
Absolutely.
just trying to have an interesting conversation on the nuances here, especially with the new child support law stating that child support begins at conception. And the reason this came into play is because, in South Carolina now they're saying life starts at conception. And so there were people who were promoting, of course, that, well, if life starts at conception, well, then somebody needs to help pay for it. So
Mm.
child support should also start at conception of life. So just looking at all of those things, right, and having all of those nuances, um, that people, I don't think a lot of people realize that this is now the law.
Mm-mm.
I don't think so.
So did this come into play when the law about abortion came into action?
Yes.
Wow.
Right. So
That
that's
that
why
does
we
make
see
Okay.
it
sense.
in three. Yeah.
They said, let's use this Kairos and go ahead and push out another law.
And then you have to think about too, just looking, when you look at that and you think about an interest rate. So it says that the South Carolina Supreme Court establishes what that interest rate is, right?
Mm.
So with all of that being said, like how many gestational weeks does a mother have to be like to start receiving that child support?
It doesn't say that. It says at conception.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if sometimes women don't know until they're really, really into, 4, 5, 6 weeks sometimes. That, because you gotta know you missed your cycle and those kinds of things. So when you go present to the doctor to confirm, I would think that yes, I have a pregnancy. We need to get a date of gestation here. When was that date?
Wow.
Wow, that takes me to my other question. Are there any protections in place if someone genuinely didn't know they were the biological father?
That's a good question. I didn't see. That's a great question. I did not see that. I did not see that as an option in this new
Right.
statute. But that's a great
Wow.
question. Because
Then what?
what if someone thought that Henry was the father and Henry takes paternity tests and he's not, then
Oh.
Jake is the
Exactly.
father. So that's what she's saying. Now Jake finds out he's the father, but he didn't know he was the father potentially because she said Henry was the father, right? And so
Right.
now Jake could have, now Jake's got to pay an arrearage. He's got to pay all that back child support. Didn't know, but he didn't know. But I guess Isabel, he knew he was there.
For sure.
you know,
For sure.
Yeah.
he knew it was a
Yeah.
possibility, right?
There was a chance, yeah.
There was a chance. So maybe we need to. I think the grand scheme of things is what and we're not turning this into a political um, debate or conversation.
Mhm.
People are pushing for you to have a family unit.
Mm.
Mhm.
The
You
nuclear
know,
family.
yeah. So you wait, you get married, you have children, and you know who the father is, and you got to kind of help promote some of that. I that's how I view this because then you're assuming that no one steps outside of a marriage or no one because
Mm.
we've seen cases like that dozens of times where someone thought they were the father to the children and they're not. But I think that was that push for that people would think.
I do have a question. So, is this law based on where the mother lives? Because what if she goes on vacation and gets pregnant? Is it based off
So this is a
the fact that she lives in South Carolina?
South Carolina law, um, and so that's an interesting question too, Isabel, because Nioka, because often you do child support where the father lives.
Oh.
So that's a great. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a great nuance to this. Um,
Mhm.
but the child is here.
Mhm.
I guess we'll have to see what happens with that. Because
Wow.
the mother's here, the child, if the mother is in South Carolina, child's in South Carolina, does this law apply if dad is not in South Carolina?
Mm.
Right.
Usually
Wow.
we do it where the father is located. So there are cases where you have women and children who live in South Carolina, but child support is being done in North Carolina or Maryland because that's where father lives. So we'll have to see. That's a great question. That's a great question to think about. And type that in.
Yeah, what if he doesn't even live in the United States? Then what?
South Carolina. Yeah. So that's a great question. That's something to think about. Give our
Mm.
audience something to think about as they're listening and they go back and replay this.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that 11.50%
11.50%
in
interest.
interest?
In interest.
Goodness.
Wow.
You don't even get that much interest in your savings account every day. Wow, that is crazy.
Having children is a beautiful thing, right? Sometimes it almost feels like people punish you for having children. I guess they want to say you got to take care of the children. Just make sure you're taking care of your children. Oftentimes all of this can be avoided if the parents, if the two parties can get along and work out their differences and don't involve the courts. It's almost like you mediate yourself, right?
Mhm.
Hey, we're,
Right.
we're gonna, we're gonna do this. We're gonna be great co-parents together, and we're gonna raise these children or this child. And we don't need the courts to tell us to pay for stuff or to make sure our child is taken care of financially. We can do that ourselves, and some of this could quite possibly be avoided. But I think about those cases where sometimes people don't go to court for years to get child support. um, what happens then? So if you have somebody that has never been to court for child support, and then all of a sudden there's a new filing and the child is 3, 4, or 5 years old, are we going back retroactively? I know the court gets a lot of discretion. The court gives a lot of discretion in deciding about back child support and what that means. But it now you have a law that says child support obligation begins when the child is conceived. And so, how much discretion are the courts going to use in trying to determine, when what back child support, how far that will go back, depending on when it's filed.
I have a
Wow.
question. Is there an like is there a statute of limitations for child support, or you can get it at any age that the child is?
Any age,
Oh Lord, that
right?
So
That and
from
that's
any
why.
age now, it would backdate all the way to conception.
Right, and that was what I was just saying. So the child's 2, 3, 4, 8, 10. Well, you can't do
oh my
8, 10 because
gosh.
the law was 2023. So at least now we know 2 years, 3 years. But as the years go on, if a child is 5, 6, 10, you know what happens then? And they've never filed. Now all of a sudden we're filing for a child support action. What would that look like? Because you got to go. Are we going
Wow.
all the way back to conception? All the way back to conception for the purpose of child support, and then what what income do they use? They use the income from when we were 2 years ago, and then the income
Oh,
now. Like
because the
what would
income
that look like?
changed.
Are they going to look at things like that? Right?
Right.
Is that a possibility? And I'm just playing devil's
I
advocate, throwing some questions out there.
I have another question. It may have been partially answered, but so let's say that the mother didn't know the dad, like,
Hmm.
and now the child is here,
Hmm.
and she goes these 2 3 years without filing for child support, and now she needs the help, but if paternity wasn't established until around that time or after, like, does the father then still have to go back to that, even if
That
it's the mother who didn't know?
that's the question that we don't have those answers, and that's what new having new statutes and codes of law do. It kind of you have all these questions, all these nuances, and then the courts have to determine it, and then the family courts determine it, and then eventually something would get appealed to the South Carolina Supreme Court to give a final definite answer. Or
Mm.
legislature may change something because they may say, "Oh, this isn't quite working the way we wanted it to. We need to add something else. We didn't take into consideration, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G." So, just looking at all those things. But don't forget, child support itself is not new. So a lot of the
Mhm.
child support questions will probably remain the same. It is just, I think, looking at the conception issue, that time frame and how that works, just like we're asking now, because you don't know how
Mm.
the courts are going to use their discretion to answer those.
Wow. This is definitely something
To
that'll
talk
make you
about.
consider um children.
Well, I mean, do you think that there'll be more cases filed for child support?
I mean, I think this might even encourage earlier involvement from fathers during pregnancy.
I
Right,
think so.
right. I agree with
Mm.
you, Isabel, and that's not a bad thing. Um, and I'll just tell you this as an aside. We won't get into it. Your involvement during the pregnancy also affects someone talked about adoption or termination of parental rights. We also have laws that kind of interact there that talk about similar things. So that involvement may prevent or be able to help, men who, like someone said, they didn't know they were the father or something like that, to now be more involved, or at least register for the child, for the South Carolina Fathers Registry, right? Because we have a father registry where
I
if you
didn't know
think
that.
you might be the father, you put that in there so that if any of those issues come up when you're talking about termination of parental rights and trying to um, put the child up for adoption, his name is there. But Isabel is correct. It may help promote that more nucleus. It also, to me, it may help, like what I was talking about. It may help, two parties, say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to make the decision about what care and financial care for our child or children looks like. We're not going to let the courts do it, because this is what we should be doing. And so it may do that as well. May bring it together.
Wow.
So
Wow.
just, yeah, it's a lot to think about.
Hmm.
Well, ladies, thank you. I think we've discussed this. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me
Yeah,
Yeah.
too.
it was a great addition.
A lot of food for thought.
Right, a lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
I hope we get an audience that can jump on to you know our little legal edition. I'm excited about it. Hopefully, y'all are
Mm.
too. And
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it gives an opportunity for them to see and hear and know who you are. So, um, thanks for being a part of this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And
Thank
thank
you,
you for
man.
all of our listeners.
Yes, thank you for anybody that also restreams or shares. We appreciate
Hmm.
it. All
Thank
right,
you.
ladies, let's get back to work.